Welcome to Friendly Argument with Andrew Bernard and Jeremy Jones.
Let's do this.
New stuff,
All the tangents.
some politics, booze,
Some more politics.
stuff about Kansas, and lots of cheer scenes.
Friendly Argument is a podcast showcasing conversations that seek common ground across the aisle of American politics, as well as a few laughs. We hope you guys enjoy, and thanks for watching.
Okay, I have alcohol, so I'll just go ahead and open us. This is a Friendly Argument with Andrew Bernard, and this time with Yali. And you know what, Yali? I don't actually know your last name. This is like a terrible. Is it Bitan or Bitan?
Bitan. Yali
Bitan. Excellent.
That's me.
Yeah. So there we go. So this is a Friendly Argument with Andrew Bernard and Yali Bitan. Do you have a catchphrase you'd like to say? Since Jeremy usually does his hello.
Howdy.
There you go. That's now your catchphrase. So anytime you come on this show, that's how you have to.
Great. That's how I'm used to saying hello anyways.
Exactly.
Howdy.
Beautiful. All right. Well, I don't know which order things are going to drop in. So this will either be the first or second time that we have had a guest on. Fortunately, it is both times. It is Yali. So, and I believe we are both Jeremy and I are having the same, I'll air quotes, discussion with Yali. So Yali, you want to introduce our subject matter for today?
Sure. Yeah. My name, as Andrew said, is Yali Bitan. I'm a feminist studies major at UC Santa Cruz right now. Also a man, which gives me full, what the heck is the word?
Credit, authority.
Full authority. Thank you.
There you
Full
go.
authority to talk about masculinity. That's our topic today.
Okay. I thought you were going to be sarcastic and say femininity. So I'm, I was pleasantly surprised there.
I mean, look, I was lying a little bit when I said I'm a man because I'm non-binary, so I could talk about both.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit what?
You're just lying a little bit.
Oh, yeah, just lying a little bit.
Just a little bit.
And in typical Friendly Argument fashion, I got my notepad.
You have your notebook. I currently have just a piece of paper, and I have a you know what? We're just going to we're going to reveal the closet.
Closet reveal at 5K.
This entire bit right, you can't see, but there's pretty much just empty notebooks here.
Empty notebooks. This is a man of many notebooks.
Yep. There we go. This will now be until something else happens. This will just be the notebook or the Friendly Argument notebook.
Fantastic.
So there we go. All right. So so what are we talking about today?
So yeah, we're talking about masculinity. This conversation could go a lot of different ways. But our core sort of idea that we're talking about is basically sort of like, what is masculinity to us? And where do we think that these sort of questions of gender relations and the changing nature of masculinity should be on our personal priority value list and for America as a whole? It was not worded very well, but
I find like usually
a lot of ideas.
Yeah, usually the discussion lends itself to a more like solidifying of what the actual thing we're talking about is, or we just go off in a completely different direction. So, you want to start off with let's attempt to do the show format with I guess what is masculinity to you?
Well, I was actually, if you don't mind, I was going to ask what it is to you first.
Yeah, I can go first.
Please.
So, and again, I come, for those unfamiliar with the show, I kind of represent the Judeo-Christian right-leaning evangelical/reformer evangelical view of Americanism.
And I am Jewish, and I'm a leftist. Maybe you could call me a socialist, but don't let that scare you off. I don't even fully ascribe to the label. I just think that America could be great, and it has never been great, and I would like to see it be great.
Yep, not what we're talking about today. So much I wanted to argue with. Oh.
I would also like men to be great. I think that men are in a tough spot right now with the way that the world is changing, the way that people are changing, and that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah. So I think and this is one of those things where I'll start with the definition, and the definition may get more refined as we talk.
Okay.
But I'll go ahead and say, like, for my understanding of what masculinity is it is one of two ways the human condition expresses itself, partially through genetics and partially through what's the word I'm looking for temperament. And it tends to be more of the outward facing and things oriented expression of humanity. Would probably be the best general definition.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Interesting.
So I guess
Yeah.
how would you translate that?
Oh, right, because I need to tell it back to you.
You have to. The point is that you have to prove that you were listening to me.
Right. So your version, yeah, I was not looking down at my phone. I was writing notes.
You were right. Oh no, that's what we expect out of a friendly argument host and or guest.
Very good. So what I heard from you is you describe it as one of two. So you're talking about the gender binary.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about it as an expression that plays out in genetics and temperament are the two areas that you isolated. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And you said that the temperament tends to be more outward and concerned with things. Could you clarify a little bit more? Like, so if we're talking about masculinity, we kind of necessarily need to talk about femininity as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying men are more concerned with things as opposed to women are concerned with what?
With people.
Okay, so basically social versus
we'll call STEM may not be the best way to describe it, but like
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, like there's
don't have a
yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard for me to phrase it back in your words because I disagree, of course.
Of course, yeah. But I mean, in order to effectuate a good argument against something, you have to be able to give the best argument for something.
Sure. So was my version of what you said, was that satisfactory?
I think so. The only thing I would maybe just re-emphasize is the outward expression of it maybe needs to be a little bit more. I didn't verbalize it, so I'll verbalize it now. So the outward is more of like in the social sense. So masculinity tends to be more focused on like on the outward threat, like within at least the family structure, like what's the outward threats? Like here's my group, what's going to threaten us? Let's go out and kill that thing, or let's go build the thing that will keep us from being threatened to that. Whereas femininity tends to look in more towards like, how are we doing as a culture? How are we doing as a group? What are our relationships about? Again, broad brush strokes here, but we're just getting into it.
No, these are interesting ways of thinking about it. I would say that these are, pretty surface level, not to put it down, but I mean, I of course, like, this is literally like my field of study.
Yeah.
So I've like thought about it in a lot of different ways. Is that sufficient for your part? Can I say?
I think particularly for the first bit of the discussion, then I think that's a fair,
okay.
yeah.
So I'll describe masculinity. It's hard for me to put just a definition like this is what masculinity is, because also, like you said, like masculinity is more concerned with things. I would say I would specify a little bit like masculine people tend to be concerned with things. And I would also, like I said, like I don't really agree with the gender binary, or I mean, it obviously is a thing that exists, but I think that there's more than man and woman, right? I already said that I'm non-binary. That's how I understand my identity in the world. And gender in general, this might be getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I'm sure that you and probably our audience is familiar with this term or this phrase, gender is socially constructed. What do you think of that? What does that mean to you?
So gender is socially constructed. I assume that if the premise being that gender and sex are different, correct?
Yes, that is the academic consensus.
Yeah. So therefore gender, if I understand, just to define gender real quick. So gender is the expression of what it means to be feminine, masculine within a society. Therefore, anything that is air quoted gendered is going to be defined by what the society is. So what might be masculine in ancient Greek times, aka wearing a toga, would be considered girly like today, or feminine today. Is that a decent working definition for?
Yeah, I would
say
you described it and you gave a pretty good example. Of the Greek men, and I mean there are like hundreds of examples of genders acting differently. And so the idea that it's socially constructed is that's kind of the opposite of like biological essentialism that says our sex determines our gender. And I mean, sex is also kind of on a spectrum when we talk about intersex individuals. It's like a whole nother thing.
So before we get too into that,
Sorry.
because that is a different
Yes.
topic, but I'm curious because so like when we talk about intersex people, or like there is, let me maybe take another step back in that. When you're talking about anything really, there's always going to be extreme examples of things or statistically minimal things. So like with intersex people, I believe it's like you probably have the actual percentage of the population better
It's
than I
about
do.
1%. There are about as many
Okay.
redheads as there are intersex people.
Mm-hmm.
It is a small
And that's
number,
when
but
they are
it's,
genetically, they have both
so
actually
intersex.
no, actually let me ask some more questions first just so I make sure I understand what we're talking about. So when I hear intersex, that is they have both male and female genitalia, but what I don't know is, generally speaking, is do they also have a Y chromosome?
Okay, so yeah, so this is like intersex. There are a lot of misconceptions about this because it's been so kind of buried down in our culture for like generations and generations.
Mhm.
So, and yeah, a lot of research on this has only come out in the last couple of decades. So intersex variations there's like a wide variety of them. So there are some where it would be like XXY
Mhm.
or like XYY, I think. Like there are a
Mhm.
lot of different
And
ones.
I assume that would also include just a single X chromosome, correct?
I believe so. Like
So,
there are a lot, and this is not my particular field, so I don't
mhm.
know all of the different ones. But yeah, there are a lot of ones, a lot of different types, and they materialize in a lot of different ways.
Mhm.
That is what you described as like the common, what we think of. We used to call like hermaphrodite, right?
Mhm.
Hermes and Aphrodite, the Greek gods,
Yeah.
and then yeah, so a penis and a vagina. But it can be like an undersized penis, oversized clitoris. It can be like
Mhm.
a lot of different things,
Okay.
and the rest of the body tends to
So,
look a
so
little
it's
bit.
fair to say the definition is a little, or at least the academic definition is significantly broader than the popular definition.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
So for this, so I guess for this case, for the purposes of this conversation, do you think that the academic definition would be more useful, or the popular definition?
Well, I of course tend with the academic definition because
Mm-hmm.
that's the one that makes sense to me, and it's pretty different from the casual definition, where a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people have these like old ideas of it. They might not know exactly what it is that they're talking about, and so then a lot of stuff comes from that that is like wrong, you know.
Okay. So for purposes of this conversation, why don't we define the popular definition as hermaphroditic or hermaphrodite, and then we'll use intersex as the academic
Okay, sure,
definition. Again,
sure,
like
yeah.
we're to our listening and viewing audience, these are definitions solely for the purposes of this conversation, and not necessarily the views and opinions represented in that definition are not necessarily the views and opinions that Yali and I hold, or I hold.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I mean the views of the academic definition are the ones that I hold more to be true. These make sense to me. I've done the research, I've done the reading, I've done the talking, but that's uh, we're already on the
Welcome,
tangent.
welcome
Sven,
to
get it up
tangent
on
number
the
one.
counter.
Your first tangent, at least with me. Aw,
Hey, I'll drink water to
yeah,
that.
exactly. Cheers.
Okay, so back to kind of the core masculinity. What
Mhm.
is it? Masculinity and gender in general, I define as sort of the roles and expectations placed on an individual within a society based on all these other factors. So like masculinity is, the reason that it's hard for me to change is because kind of like you said, like it changes across time and across cultures.
Mhm.
Masculinity in America is, I mean, it's currently changing. It's been changing my whole life. It's changed, since 100 years ago.
Mhm.
The kind of blue and pink dichotomy that we think of used to be reversed before World War II. Did you know about that?
Go ahead, and I don't. So go ahead and tell the
Sure.
story. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have all the details here, but kind of, yeah, they were reversed where red was considered a very manly color. So then like the pink was sort of like younger red.
Oh,
Sort of,
interesting.
and then blue, it was kind of like, oh, this is like delicate. This is like the sky or the ocean. So this is for girls.
Mm-hmm.
And then that changed. I believe it was post World War II, kind of just as like a marketing thing.
Huh.
We put it, this will be easy. We just put this is a blue toy soldier or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to market to boys. I don't know exactly, like it's very arbitrary.
Yeah.
That's kind of a big thing in my conception of gender and of masculinity, is a lot of the things that we associate with masculinity, I think is pretty arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are certain like stuff that you said that we have the tendency to things, and you kind of clarified, like you were basically like alluding to like the hunter-gatherer kind of dichotomy, right?
So, yeah, that would probably be an easy
right?
an easy example.
Yeah, where casually we think the women were at home taking care of the children and the community. The men were out hunting, like keeping the village safe.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like, I think that probably was common in a lot of places, but there is a lot of evidence of kind of the reverse happening. There were different societies that had like women were the ones going out and hunting, and men who stayed back and like tended to the kids. There's also, like
how, just out of curiosity, what was the commonality in that?
Commonality in what?
So like, is it like you can have a universal principle and there's always going to be like, and that universal means like somewhere between like 95 and 100% or something like that. So I'm just because I'm curious and I am interrupting you and I should let you finish your point.
No, it's fine.
But so it's like when you have examples like that, is it like if it's 20%, then like that's a significant number. But if it's like one-off societies, that's maybe not as significant. And I'm just curious, like to what that is, or just, and you don't have to have an actual answer. This is just more gut level reaction to what you think it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that kind of even one society to me shows me that it's not something that's like biologically essential.
Okay.
Right. If there's one person even living outside of that, then we could say that like this person exists, even if they are, we can call them an aberration. We can call this a random mutation, but there are a lot of things in our, human genome that came from random mutation, and like in all animals and plants and everything, like random mutation is just one of the many ways in which we evolve. And so like back to, yes. So like for me, like one of the big things that kind of got me to understand that gender and sex are not like so directly linked and that they don't have to be so binaristic was learning about, it was in one of my classes, it was anthropology of sex and gender. And we got this map from PBS that shows, it was like a map of the world, and it shows like all these little pinpoints where you can read about like different gender diverse cultures. And in reading them, you see like, they're like very, very different among all of them. Like it does tend to be that like most people fall, comfortably into sort of the man or woman side, but there are a lot of different ways that sort of third or more genders have existed in these different societies. So that just makes it make sense to me that like, oh, like things don't necessarily have to be this way. Also learning that like a lot of the reason, because, oh man, there are like so many conversation like directions that I could take this in.
Welcome to Friendly Argument.
Very good, very good. Is this where I want to take it?
Well, I think the best place, at least for right now, is to probably keep it as broad and surface level, because this is an initial contact point, and any like first contact is going to require a building of the language, if you will.
Yeah, you're very right. So yeah, well, why don't I step back a second and should we talk about the difference between sex and gender?
We can. I think maybe I should attempt to say, do you feel like you've made a point that I should reiterate to you, or are we still building towards that? There's no wrong answer here. Just
yeah, I mean, I'm making a lot of points. So Yeah, why don't you see if you can reiterate kind of generally what I've been
Generally
talking
what you're
about?
speaking.
Because yeah, I
So,
don't want to give you so much that
well,
your
yeah, I mean it's
iteration has to
and
be like,
it's what and so now you're seeing on the other side of it where it's like, oh hey, like this is the format and it's really hard to stick to the format because
totally.
almost any we could be talking about, I don't know, Pokemon, and there's like hours and hours and hours of discussion on like this stupid 8-bit game from our
Whoa,
childhood.
whoa, whoa, whoa! That's my childhood.
Hey, I mean, it was my childhood too. And I wasn't even allowed to own video games growing up. We had to like steal emulators off of the internet to play it. And we
Oh,
each
those are
got
good old
30
days.
minutes a day. So for an hour and a half, we got to play Pokemon. And dang it, you had better make sure that you had your 2 people in there because you only got to choose 2 of the 6 because there's 2 other guys who want the team and they want, dang it, if Charizard doesn't get all the way evolved, like, I was more of a Bulbasaur person, just saying. Blastoise is better than Charizard.
I'd say yeah. Of the three main starters, I go Bulbasaur.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I mean, Energy Beam is great. So anyway, that is another tangent, and like I said, it's very easy. So I think the general thrust of what you're going for, or what you're saying, is that gender and sex are not necessarily tied together because we see that like gender norms throughout different societies tend to be fairly fluid may not be viscous, maybe
Yeah, just changing
changeable.
and even within the same society.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so buying into a complete binary would, and this, I don't think you said this, but I'm going to go on a limb here, would be sticking to a binary may not necessarily be the most healthy thing for any given society.
Yeah,
Is
would
that a
say,
fair, is that a fair
yeah,
summation?
I think so. You boiled down a lot of what I said into some kind of key main points. So yeah, so that was like a little bit assumptive on your part, but you were definitely correct.
Yeah.
I think that the concept that of having gender as a binary is harmful in general.
Okay.
Would you like to talk about that?
We can talk about that, and then I would eventually because I believe have you already spoken with Jeremy, or is that still to go?
No, we're talking tomorrow.
You're talking tomorrow. Oh, great! So I'm setting up the thing. So I think we do need to eventually get to the point where we talk about at least in the I think your question is looking at things as a binary harmful is a good question, particularly because we can lead into, is it harmful for the United States?
Okay.
Like for our society in particular. Since a lot of the point of this podcast is, oh, hey, you and I are different. Can we still be countrymen?
Yep.
I think I would argue I think we would both argue the answer is yes, but
I think so too.
So I think
we both love America.
Yeah. So I'm going to give the very accountant-y / lawyer answer and say it depends. So like on a broad brush strokes, like if you anytime there's like a rigid norm that you have to be set into, and like in massive collectivism, I don't think that that's a good idea. Like if everyone has is just a cog in the machine that doesn't you're valuable towards the machine, but it doesn't allow you to like express your I'm trying to think of a non-Christian way of saying it. I'm the Christian, as I guess I'll just say it in the Christian way. It doesn't allow you to express your the fact that you're made in the image of God. So you can't be completely uniform. That being said, I think that within certain diet, like a certain range of things, I think it is healthier to have things that are generally more masculine and generally more feminine.
With things or people?
So I guess maybe I should take a step back, because this is the way at least I think about it, and I would assume that a lot of Christians think about it, is that there aren't really feminine or masculine things. I would argue there's feminine and masculine people, but there's not necessarily feminine and masculine things, and that's kind of a universal concept. There's only like feminine and masculine expressions of things.
Okay.
Because like if you look at the human body, like almost everything in a male body or in a female body has a counterpart in the opposite, right? So like if you like, even if you look at our genitalia, like pretty much everything that is in the penis is effectively in the vagina. It's just a different
Oh,
expression.
right, yeah, because it starts out as the same tissue.
It's like starts out, but like I mean, the testes basically are the
Ovaries.
ovaries. Thank you. I started to say ovula, and I was like, that's not the right. It is Friday after work for me, so yeah. And you know the tubes are kind of there. There's roughly the same amount of channels. There's like pretty much a 1-to-1 correlation, but they're expressed in masculine or feminine ways.
Okay.
So in the same way, like any job, like if you do accounting, there's feminine and masculine ways to do accounting, right? There's the let me see if I can do this. So there's kind of the, we don't care, this is the rules, we are going to make sure that the company is safe version of it, which is maybe could potentially considered more masculine. And then there's the, hey, there's a business relationship here, what do we actually need to do that so everybody who's ever going to deal with this particular problem will be happy? So it may not necessarily be by the book. It is better relationally.
Okay, I'm interested in why you pose those two different methods as masculine and feminine, because that sounds to me like the masculine one is the one that like hurts in general.
Well, okay, so the masculine, like in the case of like my accounting example, so the on the surface, the feminine reason would be the one that makes everybody feel better, but may expose you to different liabilities. Like it may be wrong, like air quotes wrong. It could, like, maybe it'll never come up, but if something breaks, then we're screwed.
Okay. I'm like not familiar enough with accounting to like
That's
really
fair. It may not be,
your
it may,
example.
like I said, I just got off of work, so it's going to be a lot of accounting.
And I just got off from writing finals, so
Yeah, so it's all going to be feminist theory. Got it.
exactly.
Yeah. And so I will cop to that this is not my best example ever. So why the masculines may not be harmful. So the masculine is more conservative, it's more protective. There's an outside threat that could come in and hurt us because we didn't necessarily do the things that we ought to have done, right? Like maybe they didn't need to be done, but they ought to have been done.
Okay.
And in this example, I will admit this is a poor example because the more metaphysical a thing is, the harder it is for it to be clear on what an expression would be, right? So like personally, I probably would, in most accounting, I would find the line where it's like, okay, we're probably not going to get in trouble, but this makes everybody happy, right? Whereas somebody who is female may be like, nope, we're just going to go straight by the book.
I'll have to take your word for it.
Okay, that's fair. Like I said, it's not my best example ever.
Yeah, well, let's bring it back to what the example was trying to demonstrate.
Okay.
Like, kind of, yeah, I'm not even sure what it was trying to do.
It was not, like I said, sometimes I come up with really good examples, and other times they just hit the fan really hard.
Well, okay, we're talking about the gender binary, right? Mm-hmm. So, and so your point was basically, in some cases, it's good to have the gender binary because this was the part that I wasn't exactly sure about.
Okay, yeah. So let me see if I can. I may have to take a minute to think about like what at least a decent answer is for this. Okay, so this might take a minute to get to. So we'll see if we can get there. So again, talking from from a kind of a Judeo-Christian perspective, the reason sometimes it is good to have a gender binary is because there's certain responsibilities that we are given between being a man and a woman.
Like what? Can you give an example?
So men are called to be sacrificial lovers. Like, so if you look at the view of marriage as considered by Paul in the Bible, it talks about how the man is supposed to be above the woman as Christ was above the church, right?
Okay. I'll let you know I'm really unfamiliar with
Yeah, that's why
Christianity in general.
like I said, this may take a minute to get to. So
Mhm.
the reason that is given as the role of like what husbands, or we'll say men, are supposed to be is because Jesus sacrificed literally everything that could be sacrificed in order to love and create the flourishing for his church,
Uh-huh.
right? And so that is the example given of the responsibility to men, whereas women are called to, let's see what the best way to say it is, are called to be respectful to their husbands. But I don't know if this is
Isn't it like deferent?
deferent. Deference may not necessarily be the best way of describing the situation. It's well, I guess defer might be the better way. The way it's generally considered, at least in my circles of Christianity, is at the end of the day, the husband is responsible. So therefore it's on the husband to make the decision.
Mm-hmm.
And that is generally considered to be a masculine trait. So it's the question of, so I guess it's a sort of, the dichotomy is good when there's a question of responsibility, but I don't know if that's necessarily the best argument for a societal issue.
Yeah, because I would say like, or I would ask, do you think that it's good that men are expected in this tradition to be sacrificial for the family and women are expected to defer to the man?
I think that it tends to be a more healthy expression. Yes. But see,
More
here's
healthy, like,
the thing. Like, I think it's because we as a society don't like the idea of deference, because the man's still called to is still called to defer to Christ. Like, the man is not ultimately responsible, or sorry, not he is ultimately responsible, but he is under the authority of someone else as well.
okay.
That didn't help you.
Was that supposed to answer my question?
Well, it
I'm
was, but it
basically,
didn't. So,
yeah, I'm basic because so like to me, you've been talking for a little bit. Let me kind of give you. These are sort of my thoughts on this.
mhm.
Like I see, yeah, like men are told to, or like kind of expected to be more responsible yeah, we can just talk about the family. It like traditional masculinity, it's like men are the breadwinners, the protectors, etc. Right? Do you think that that is good?
That's the expectation for them.
Yeah.
I think that's a very modern interpretation of it, but yes.
Well, yeah, I'm a modern
So
man.
yeah, okay, that's fair. So I mean, traditionally, when you look at throughout most of human history, and particularly like Western civilization, it wasn't it wasn't necessarily that men were supposed to be the breadwinners per se. They were supposed to go do the hard work, like the stuff that required more muscle and bone density. So going and working in the field, going and hunting, particularly because generally speaking, men are more disposable than women. But women were expected to earn an income, and generally speaking, women had better economic opportunities
And is
previously
that
than they don't necessarily today.
a, a question? Like when were women earning income? Like how long back ago are you looking?
So the Industrial Revolution is when it really started when women's economic possibilities started to really fall. So it was when that like home spinning, or like basically when textiles went away, and when like food preparation went away. Generally tended to be like when women's economic opportunities started to decrease.
Okay. I don't know enough about like this aspect of the history. I mostly know kind of the like the history that I've learned is like women were here and then it's been kind of like
Yeah.
this slow rise.
That's one way of looking at it. I would posit another way of looking at it is we see basically the way I think about it is, when did animals stop being able to kill us en masse, right? And so like the more danger there was from the outside, generally speaking, the less freedom women and children tended to have. And the more freedom we had, the less our environment was trying to kill us, the more freedom women and children got Also, the less men died, but
Okay. Yeah, I think that I could agree with that. In the
so
abstract.
in the
I'm like,
abstract,
yeah, yeah, like I said, like I'm not familiar enough with like the specific history of that part. Um, but so, so my question was this idea, like, is it sort of a good dichotomy? Well, because masculinity is like really changing and like the gender relations, right? It's like now things are a lot more sort of equal between, at least in terms of like going out to work and stuff like that.
hmm
Um, so like where, okay, maybe this would be how we can like move a little bit more towards the present, is like how do you see that like masculinity has shifted in America in the last like 70 years or so?
okay. So since World War II,
Yeah, basically.
okay, which I would I could see the argument. I may even make the argument that there was a very big switch in gender roles and expectations after World War II, because all of a sudden, like, we lost our traditional work, like manual workforce, and more women went into that, and then we came back and it's like, oh crap, like everything's automated now. Um, I went on a tangent. I'm supposed to how have I seen masculinity change in the last 70 years?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, because right
I
now
think
we've been talking very like historically, very like
mhm,
globally, and we're trying to bring it into
into the
America.
US. So I think that I think that after World War II, sometime either before or after World War II, the expectation of the father, there was a generation, maybe even two or three, where the father was expected to basically be present but unavailable, because all that was required of him was to provide, right? And I don't think that that was historically what really was expected of, like, a, we'll say, like a good man, right? Like the I would so there's that weird point where that's the thing. Then as we've gone further along, and at the same time as like our technology has drastically changed every part of our life, socially, economically, uh relationally, there's been less and less of that, and I think more and more merging of what general humans are capable of doing, right? So I think that you're right, that there is, in the modern sense, there is a blending of like what is masculine and feminine, but the expectations for, I think the expectations for men have actually decreased, and I think been a broadening of what the definition is. And I would argue that, while good for some, like a minority of a minority, I don't know that that's necessarily good for a majority, because
In what way?
I find that creativity, and this may not be the best way of going it, but it's the way I'm going to. So I find that creativity is best done when there's a box, a fairly large box, but there's a box. So there's an easy definition of like, okay, this is where I'm expected to be. How am I going to express that individually? So the less of a box there is, the more ennui and angst that there is within oneself. As a social example, if you put small children in a playground and you don't have a fence there, they will all clump into the middle of a playground. Whereas if you put a fence, they'll run around the entire part.
Is that real?
I mean, it was real when I read it, so
Yeah, where was that, like a scientific study that
it's
was
been
done?
20 years since I've read that, but yeah, I can let's we are right next to the Google machine.
Yeah, I've just never heard that example. It's an interesting example.
Children in a park. Oh, we'll say playground.
So is the best classical music the music of the Baroque era, where it was all rules?
No, I mean, every era of music has its own thing, but I mean, every era of music had internal rules, and it was playing with those rules that made it good or bad.
Well, yeah, isn't some of the most like the art that usually it like retroactively receives some of the highest recognition is the stuff that kind of breaks the rules a little bit, right?
Yeah, but that you move into it, but it's still a knowing of those rules, and the breaking of the rules just leads you into a new thing because you still end up having rules of a thing.
Okay, so kind of expanding the box.
Or at least changing the box.
Sure.
Yeah, and I mean, you can only take a metaphor so far. So,
Yeah, I'm just
so
trying
I
to see where it
have
fits
a
into the
quick
metaphor.
Google of children in a playground without a fence, clump in the middle. Leads to there's a science direct fences of childhood changing the meaning of playgrounds. I'm not going to read that one, but there is something from uxdesign.cc. So I assume that this is user design, so like in design interface. Fenced-in playgrounds, how boundaries can encourage greater creativity. In the understand a simple study observe any physical style of fence around the playground is consequences. Process. It's possible for yeah, there's like a bunch of crap in here, but it's like at least a thing that's been talked about before. So
Okay.
I may be wrong, but I'm not crazy.
Okay. I'll accept this premise.
Yep. So
Um,
I don't know if did that answer anything? I feel like I've tangented.
we've been tangenting, but we're tangenting in a direction.
Yeah. So I guess
Um,
my general answer is yes. I don't know that I've necessarily described my reasoning behind it the best, but do you want to at least give what your summation of it is?
yeah. So my understanding, because my question, right, was like, is this sort of like gender binary or this responsibility on men, this kind of box of masculinity, is it a good thing? And
Mm-hmm.
you say yes, it is a good for I guess the majority of people
Mm-hmm.
because not having that box leads to ennui and angst.
That's fair. Both in the majority of individuals, and I would argue with the society.
Yeah. So uh, personally,
Mm-hmm.
when because we live in today and now, like queer, trans, non-binary people, this is much more in sort of the mainstream discussion. We are talking a lot more about gender. So this box sort of is opening. Is
Mm-hmm.
that giving you ennui and angst?
Not particularly because the box I live in, I still live in a particular box, and I find that I'm a weird individual in that I've taken a lot of time to develop a worldview, and it's like I think it's more personality driven than anything. But like personally, no. But I could see in society how that does tend to have issues.
Can you give like who is this expanding box of gender hurting?
Who is it hurting? So like I guess maybe the better way I'm going to redescribe the question. So how I would say the how is the expanding box hurting people or the majority of people? And
Okay.
so my answer to that is that you see more and more what we'll call man children, like guys who just don't do anything, don't strive for anything, are content to watch sports, play video games, and
And you think it's
work a dead
because
end
the
job.
gender box is expanding?
Do I think that's because the gender box is expanding? I think to a certain extent, yeah. Like I'm not going to. One of the thing I read, one of the books that kind of I try to have influence this pod or this show is How to Have Impossible Conversations by Peter Bognizen. I think is his. I can't
Yeah, I
remember.
heard you
Yeah,
reference it on a previous episode.
yeah. So one of the points, and there's like probably 100 odd points in how to have these conversations, but one of them is that nothing is completely responsible for anything. So
Uh-huh.
there's only things that contribute to a thing.
Yeah,
So I
and
would say
most
that
things are not the result of just one thing.
yes, yeah,
Usually a
any
lot of things.
coalesce and then that event happens. But even as that event's happening, there's several other events that are happening that are both influenced by and influencing any given event. So you can
Okay.
only say it contributes to it. So I would say a major contributor to that is the expanding box of
Okay.
masculinity.
Can you show either by example or even anecdote like how that's contributing to it?
How that the expanding box is contributing.
Yeah.
So I mean, so I guess I think the example that comes to mind is, so right now we're struggling to have a definition of what masculinity is just within our own conversation, right? And so if there's no definition of what it means to be a man, but you identify as a man, what are you responsible for? What are you called to do? What is your role in society?
I think that's a good point. Yeah. So my thought on that is like, how do I want to say this? Basically, let me rephrase your point, see if I understand what you're saying. You're saying that without kind of a framework to sort of fit into or aspire to, a lot of our young men are lost, we could say.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment.
And I agree that there are a lot of things that contribute to it. We don't have to get too into it, but I think that a lot, like, I see the sources of these kind of being lost as like not the gender thing, but I do see where there is something to that. And I think that's kind of gets to like the larger topic of our conversation is like kind of like the gender question, like, which is, there's not one question. There are like a lot of these kind of conversations that we're having about gender these days. And so like personally, like what I've seen, because sort of, yeah, I grew up in a culture that was very, it did show like there was one way to be a man, or like, yeah, it was a pretty narrow definition. It was basically, it's like kind of, and I remember even talking about this in some of my gender classes where it would be like, what does it mean to be a man? Number one, wait, first, if you could say one thing, what does it mean to be a man? What would you say?
Like within society or like
Yeah,
personally?
Yeah, within society.
So I keep coming. These questions are always fun because my answer tells you what meta question I was thinking was your question. Right? Because what does it mean to be a man? Well, that's also, there's several ways that question. There's several questions that question could be answering. What does it mean to be a man in my own personal view? What does it mean to be a man within this particular view of society? What does it mean to be a man within the context of the person asking it? Right.
So what does it mean to be a man generally, casually in our society? Or not what does it mean, but like one short, like kind of.
No, you're asking a broad question that I'm trying to distill, because I think to a certain point there's a lack of definition, which is an answer, but I don't think it's the answer that I actually want to give.
Give the answer you actually want to give.
We'll say then that's the problem, is like I'm trying to give you an answer, and the thing I'm coming up with is like I don't have a clear thing that I think is, I mean, I could say you're an aggressive dude, like I could say an aggressive dude bro who just wants to have sex, but I don't think that that's an actual definition of what it means to be man. And I think it's that definition is the definition everyone tells everyone the definition is, but it's not the actual definition everyone thinks is the definition.
I think that I completely agree with you on that. I think that what you just said, like aggressive dude bro just wants to have sex, that is sort of like the messaging, at least that I got growing up, is like that's what it is to be a man.
Yeah, but see, I didn't, like I said, that's the popular zeitgeist.
Right.
That zeitgeist that we're given, but I don't think that's the zeitgeist anyone believes.
I think so too, and I think that's like why we're having these questions, is because I think a lot of that kind of media was being really proliferated from like the 60s till I mean, basically still, although it has changed quite a bit in the last decade or so. But I just think of like all the movies that came out from like the mid 90s to like late 2000s, where it's just like corny dude is just like average.
It's what it's what my wife calls boy humor. I'm like, it shouldn't be like this humor is not necessarily gender. It's gendered, but it's like, oh, boys tend to like this humor better. And I think it's the somewhere along the line, I think I could probably do a rant on it, but I don't have like enough backup. It's a thing that I have not earned the right to know yet. But I think that from the 1960s on, we have glorified the cad and not the actual man.
Glorified the what?
The cad. CAD.
CAD?
Yeah.
What is that?
So a CAD, let me look up the actual definition. It's kind of an older, I have one of my best friends always rolls his eyes at, very often rolls his eyes at me because I use like phrases from the 1920s. So a CAD, a man who behaves dishonorably, especially towards a woman. It's like, he's a CAD. Um, yeah, so the definition is her adulterous CAD of a husband. So it's the
Okay.
it's the very thirsty guy, I think would be
Yeah,
would be the modern day equivalent.
sure. The simp.
Yeah. Wait.
No, not exactly. Not
Hold
exactly.
on. Yeah, I was like,
Just
hold on.
just a
That one
funny
seems a little
modern.
more like both are pejorative, but
Yeah, no, definitely not the right word. I was just
urban. I wonder if I can.
okay. Well, but wait, these definitions don't matter. I think that I have enough from what you said already to like get us on the point.
Mhm.
So when I was asking you like, what do you think is a man? I was a little bit trying to bait out an answer.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of why I also suspected that too. But
And I know, but I wasn't trying to bait you to like say the wrong answer or anything, because I was the one who gave this answer when my professor asked like, what does it mean to be a man? I told her it means don't be a sissy, don't be a
Mhm.
girl, right? I feel like that is really tied into a lot of our modern sort of concepts of like, what does it mean to be a man? Is
Mhm.
like being, you can't be a woman. Any sort of expression of like femininity
Mhm.
or of like weakness or not of weakness, but like a lot of expressions of like emotion, we
Mhm.
see them as like womanly, we see them as vulnerable, we see them, and we see womanly and vulnerability as weak.
Mhm.
And this is something that I think is like probably my biggest kind of gripe with like traditional masculinity or modern masculinity, whatever we want to call it,
Mhm.
is this idea that just conflates, yeah, the feminine, this is something undesirable. And we
Yeah.
see this is like really pervasive in our society. This is what people talk about when they talk about like misogyny, patriarchy, etc. Is
Mhm.
this idea that, and you kind of alluded to this earlier with the like man and woman's place. Like a man is like, it's like the top of the family, and the woman kind of answers to him. And that kind of creates this
Yeah.
hierarchy.
That's not. That is what it probably sounded like. That's not exactly what I was saying.
Okay, I
But
believe you because I
yeah.
know that you're talking from the religious perspective, and that's not
Mhm.
my perspective.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I understand that. I just don't. It's a common misperception, and so I find that within the bounds of conversations, particularly when you are trying to make someone not the other, that anytime there's like a massive thing that's wrong, even particularly when it's detrimental, that it deserves correction. Like, if not explanation, at least correction as quickly as possible.
okay, so yeah, so I granted, yeah,
Yeah,
it's not necessarily what you were saying, but that is how it's.
that is the perception. Yes, I understand.
Got
Sorry.
you.
Go ahead. I interrupted you.
Okay, sorry. We're cat sitting for my roommate's girlfriend, and this cat is just like in my closet. She got
Just
a little jingle bell, very
mhm.
cute. Um,
Yeah. Do you want me to? I can talk a little bit on some of that because I think this is a point where we will be able to cheers because we agree on that,
okay.
right? So if you look at the traditional, the Judeo, like the traditional Judeo-Christian version of this, like um, I don't know when the suppression of emotion became a thing. I don't know like where in our history that became, because if you look at like particularly a lot of like classical literature, or even if you go and read through in the Bible, like it is chock full of people like of dudes having like emotional fits that we wouldn't eat, like we would, if like it doesn't matter who guy girl in between was having this in public, we'd be like, oh, that's not appropriate, like save that for your house. But it's just like out in the street, like just absolutely wailing. So I think somewhere along the line, like I think there's always, that being said, I think there's always been a call to not be a sissy within masculinity, but that's more of, hey, you need to be some kind of tough. Like things are going to be hard, you're going to feel things, but your job or your responsibility is to move past that to the point where you and other people are safe. I think it's what traditionally not being a sissy was. But and this is, I don't know if I've expressed this idea on the podcast, but I feel like every idea has a good kernel of truth, and then as it moves through the world, it just collects crap around it. So then we start thinking that the crap is the thing and not actually what the truth is.
I think I kind of follow. You're kind of saying the core idea of like that version of masculinity that I just sort of posited, it comes from, it's like at the end of the day, it's like you got to take care of your family,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Correct.
And yeah, and so yeah, I think that like
I would maybe expand it to your family and others. Like your job is to take care of others.
Right. It's just yeah, and to be able to take care of others in the face of like adversity,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's kind of like what toughness is. And yeah, I think like, yeah, at some point, yeah, this got conflated with masculinity, and it's like you have to be this thing. And like, yeah, I've just thought about this a lot personally because of my like encounters with like homophobia when I was younger, and then just like in recent years kind of like unpacking all of that and just realizing that like, and we were all like 12 or 13-year-old boys. None of us like knew what our sexualities were. None of us had like kissed anyone, but
Mm-hmm.
I was just like a little bit different from them. Like, you know, I had long hair
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't like athletic or whatever. And they like had to put me down for that. They call me gay. They call me sissy. They call me all kinds of bad things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, and this was just in a way to like protect their own selves
Mm-hmm.
from like, it's like, oh, I'm making fun of this person for being that thing. I'm not this thing.
It was,
and it's like,
it was climbing the childhood dominance hierarchy.
yeah, basically. And yeah, there's like something in there with, yeah, like the emotion stuff. What am I even trying to say? There's like a lot of thoughts and feelings in here, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, teaching, like, okay, we've all heard boys don't cry.
Mm-hmm.
We've all heard, like, if we were ever on a sports team, we've heard like man up or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, these kind of things I think are really sort of like, these are the things that sort of create our ideas, like this negative notion of what masculinity is, of like having to be tough, not being able to show emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And even though that might not really be what people think is being a man, if enough people believe it kind of on the outside, then that kind of becomes what everyone thinks of it.
Yeah.
Right? What do you think of that?
I think there is some truth to that. I think that there is, because like even when you were given the examples you were given, it was like one of them, I was like, boys don't cry. I was like, well, I don't think that one's a healthy thing. But like, you know, on the next example you gave was being on a sports team, like man up. I think there is something helpful to that. Maybe.
Well, so the sentiment behind man up, I could get behind, but the specific language of man up, right? It's like, let's say like this happened to me when I was playing soccer. I don't remember ever getting told man up. I'm sure it happened.
Yeah.
But like you're playing soccer or whatever, so you get a soccer ball to the face.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you know what? Here, perfect example. This is actually, my therapist recently told me she and her daughter were at the park and she saw two soccer teams practicing, boy team and a girl team. And her daughter saw within 10 minutes, like the same thing happen where someone gets hurt. I don't know how, someone's down on the ground. And the differences in how the two teams responded to this was like water and oil. Okay. The girl team, the girl falls down, the coach goes to her, all the other girls gather around, they're like making sure she's okay, you know, patting her back, whatever. On the boys team, someone falls down, the coach is like, everyone take a knee. And they go and check on the kid, and the kid gets up and everyone claps. It's like, wow, he was a real man about it. He didn't need any help. There's like a kernel, like you say, of like some good value in there. But I think that this generally teaches men to be less emotionally vulnerable, less open, less compassionate. This idea that like I don't need anyone's help. I just have to take care of myself. Right? There's that kernel. But especially like as we move into the modern day, like that becomes less and less important, I think.
I think that I think I can agree with a lot of that. Though I guess when you were talking, what I started to hear, at least how I translated in my mind, is the difference in that example is, again, like it's the same thing, but it's getting expressed in a masculine and feminine ways. So there's a
Well,
book
that's
that
what, right. I mean, that was at least my definition in the beginning. Is masculinity and femininity are expressions
Mhm.
of.
of the same thing. It's because because we are souls in a bunch of meat. Like the way we have our meat makes the way we have expressions. Like my body's running full of testosterone, so like there's going to be things and ways that like will just naturally biologically experience things that my wife, who's full of estrogen and oh shit, what's the other one?
Progesterone.
I'm sorry.
Progesterone.
Progesterone. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It starts with the P, right?
Yeah, progesterone.
Yeah. Like I remember it was those two she has two. I have one, even though technically she also produces. This is one of those like weird things of biology that always kind of amazes me, is like she can have testosterone in her body and it won't be the greatest thing, but she needs a little bit of it, right? If I have either of those two things produced of her two things in my body, I start getting poisoned.
Poisoned is maybe not how I would say it, but
Sure. It's not necessarily helpful.
Yeah, it's not the way that your body was designed to handle
Correct.
those hormones.
Anywho, yeah. So backing up a couple points, like what I'm hearing from that is there's expressions there that I think are just how broad brush people who are either masculine or feminine are going to react well to something. There's I'm trying to remember the name of the book. It's one of those in my infinite books I'm interested in reading. It's called oh, you know what? Again, this is the bad thing about doing this over Zoom, is I have immediate access to the internet, which means that I am
Oh, that's great.
distractible.
Look, that's good. That means that we could fact check each other on the spot.
That's true, but see, technically, we're now taking away jobs from Gwen, yes, Gwen, who is supposed to be our researcher. I'm sorry, Gwen. I'm not that sorry. I'm never that sorry. I'm a little bit sorry for Gwen, but Sven can just go straight to hell. Which isn't great because I'm pretty sure the person who's basically Sven right now is my wife, so I shouldn't say that. Okay. Well, I think my wife has been adding things to my book. Oh wait, no, this is my wish list. That's why. Okay. There was books I'm interested.
Can I add a book onto your reading list?
Yeah. Well, let me get to the point where I can add something. Okay, it's called Top Dog by Poe Bronson and Ashley Merriman. And I think the basic gist of it, I haven't read it, I'm just going off of what I've been told about the book, is that the way men and women are inspired is drastically different. So Poe Bronson, I believe, was the coach of Vanderbilt's both the men and women's soccer teams. And part of what he says in the book is that the way he had to encourage the men's team was basically like, get your heads out of your asses and start perform and like do your jobs. And that was what it would encourage them. Whereas with the women's team, he'd have to be like, come on, guys, we can do this together. Like we're like, the rally and come together, and that encouraged them to do better.
And so, okay, so obviously you haven't read the book, but
I haven't read the book. I'm just going off of the summary.
But let's just use that example. So, so let's say, yeah, these two teams, they had to be motivated in different ways. Is that like an innate thing of like being a man or like a male or a female, or is that those are kind of like products of the ways that they've been socialized into masculinity and femininity?
I think that there's contributing factors to that. Part of it's going to be personality, part of it's going to be genetics, part of it's that. But I think broad brush strokes, I would say it's closer to being innate differences in how to inspire masculine and feminine people. So if you look at another book I really like, and it's a work of fiction, so it doesn't really matter, but it was called Once an Eagle, and it would basically follow this guy's military career from like a private in World War I through, I think, like Vietnam or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that it talked about was when he was in charge of people, he'd have to yell at some people, like sweet talk to other people, and basically let other people just leave other people alone. And that's how he had to get people to work. So I think that, like, again, there's always going to be a difference between what broad brush works for the majority of people and then what works for individual people.
Mm-hmm.
So like when I was on a football team, like the way that we were most usually, like, that we got inspired the best was our coach would come in and be like, come on guys, you can do better than this. Like, we can do better than this. And it was like the oh, we're disappointing coach that got us to do better. Whereas like personally, if I'm going to be really, really motivated, it's because I'm going to I guess it's the same thing. I'm letting someone else down. Right. Whereas yelling at someone, like, I don't give two craps if someone thinks I'm doing a poor job. It's, do I think I'm doing a poor job, or I'm letting someone down? I don't know. I feel like I may have gone on a couple tangents there.
No, but well, I don't. Yeah. So what you just described, I don't think is like, because you're a man, you don't want to let people down. I think that that's pretty human.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think the way that it gets expressed, the way that I tend to express it, I think tends to be more masculine than it does feminine.
Well, of course, because you're a man.
Well, yes, but so like now I have to think, like, how do I do it, and then how would I express it if I was female? I'll have to think about that one, because I was thinking of, like, between myself and my wife, and it's like what we would do would basically be the same.
I guess that's
which doesn't help my argument. So.
But well, yeah. So I mean, that's a perfect example. You and your wife, you two feel concretely, firmly, you're a man and a woman.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of ways in which you're very much the same. Doesn't that basically prove my point?
No, well, I think it can prove. Yes, I would think that it adds to your argument.
Uh-huh.
Say that proves your point, but I think it does. Sure. It does add to your argument. I would still say that, like, my general thesis is people have masculine and feminine expressions of the same thing, and the more metaphysical you get, the harder it is to parse that out.
Mm-hmm. But you just said that you and your wife had the same expression.
We would do it in the same way. So I still think that I'm correct. I just don't know. I don't know how to articulate at this particular point how I would be correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So in my defense, this is another thing in Peter Bogdasen's How to Have Impossible Conversations, which I found to be helpful, is you have to let your friends be wrong. Right. So maybe through this conversation in like 3 weeks, I'll be like, yep, worldview's completely changed. But like at this point, it's like, I don't have an answer right now, so I have to think through it.
Yeah,
and so this would be a case where you have to let me be wrong, and maybe I am wrong. Maybe I'm right, and I just don't know how to articulate it yet.
That's good enough for me. I'm having a good time. I feel like
excellent.
I'm probably introducing some ideas you haven't thought of. You're definitely introducing some ideas I haven't thought of. And yeah, this is something I've also learned. Most kind of like these bigger ways of how we view the world, it doesn't change when someone just puts it to you right then.
You've got a gotcha never changed anyone's mind.
Absolutely.
My mom often says no one ever got argued into the kingdom of heaven, and then I quibble with her that there's several examples of people getting argued into the kingdom, but
it's like debating with St. Peter.
I'm sorry.
Debating with St. Peter.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. Paul was also really good at that. What was I going to say? Oh, so it has been, I believe, I don't have a clock on this, but I'm looking at our time, and we've been an hour. So I'd like to take 15 minutes, and let's talk about, like, let's ask so for American society, is gender binary good or bad? Do you want to go first, or you want me to go first? I can go first.
Okay. I think that the current system of gender in America is pretty harmful in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. The ways that it kind of, even like we've said, like, men and women aren't exactly like this way, but we do kind of get pushed into these boxes by the society, how we're socialized and everything. I think that it creates a lot of inequalities, like for both sides. Like, in this is kind of yeah, the expectations placed on men and women hurt both men and women because it doesn't allow people to, like you were kind of saying earlier, like express themselves like in their own version of their image of God. I might be like saying it a little bit
It's
wrong.
close. It's close enough for government work.
Well, yeah, so, we're all trying to express ourselves as individuals. And so I see the gender binary as making that more difficult because it's saying, like, oh, if you're a woman, it's expected that you're going to wear a dress and wear makeup and stuff. If you're a man, it's expected you're going to wear a suit, have short hair, and like these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, not everybody fits right into there. And as our society's changing, like these expectations are getting less strict, but in a lot of ways they still are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, how is this affecting America in general? This is like a pretty big question. Are we talking about socially, politically, economically? Like,
I think we're technically a political podcast show because of our catchphrase. But I think any of those you want to talk about, I would say probably with this, socially is probably the bigger one, and that would affect the other aspects.
yeah. So I mean, socially, this man and woman thing, like I said, like, yeah, it creates a lot of really weird sort of like I heard it described before as like gender is sort of like a script that's passed down, and
Mhm.
each generation kind of they learn the script and make their own little variations,
Mhm.
but the script is still, it's like you're in a movie. You can ad lib a little bit, but like you got to stick to the script.
Mhm.
And having this sort of script that we're told like we should stick to, I see as being confining in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
And like if we're talking socially, like here's an example: is like it's expected in romance that like the man makes the first move, right? It's like
Mhm.
typically we think like the man approaches the woman at the bar or whatever. Man sends the first message on like Tinder or something.
Mhm.
Man's gonna pay for at least the first date.
Yeah.
Man's gonna go forward, hold open the door. Man's gonna be the one to propose, etc. It's all these kind of things. And I don't know, that seems to me really arbitrary, and it like allows for all these other like weird things. And it's like, I mean, in my conversations with like men, mostly men and women, and I'm 25, so like this kind of age range, like a lot of people are really wishing that that was not the case. It would, because men have a lot more, I see men being a lot more worried about like the rejection and just feeling
Mhm.
bad and stuff, so they don't want to do it. Of course, women are also, I hear from a women's side, it's like, oh, they don't want to make the first move because like, they don't know who this guy is. They're not trying to get sexually assaulted
Mhm.
or worse.
No one wants to be the statistic.
Exactly. Nobody wants to be a rape statistic. Absolutely
Yeah.
not.
Well,
And
any statistic. Very rarely do you want to be the statistic.
yeah. In this definite case I was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I don't see this binary idea of gender helping these things at all. If anything, I see it as hurting it, and it creates this dichotomy, and it creates sort of a hierarchy where in most parts of our society, men are considered above. This again is changing, and that's why
Mhm.
we're having this conversation. But this is kind of how it's been, and that's like, I don't see this as being really good for anyone.
Mhm.
Would you like to recap?
Well, let me just make sure that I understand kind of
Yeah.
what in general you're saying. So what I heard you say was that in general, our society is changing in such that like our tradition, like having what I'll call a small box definition of what is masculine or feminine, or having having even necessarily the binary over a spectrum is detrimental because it puts a lot of unneeded social pressures and tensions onto people that wouldn't necessarily have to be there. Is that a
Yeah,
fair summation?
yeah, I would say
Okay.
that that was pretty good.
Excellent.
I would even add, if I may,
Please.
um,
This is the format. You are allowed to add. It's until you feel comfortable, Yali.
Okay, yeah. Well, this was because something you said made me think of another point.
Mm-hmm.
So, in our society, like the way that like the traditional masculinity of being like the aggressor, like I'm gonna dominate, I'm gonna take over this, is like not even really that useful anymore in a lot
Mm-hmm.
of situations. Because so like earlier you were talking about, this kind of dichotomy was created because typically, yes, like men's biology, like we're stronger, we could, lift the heavy rocks,
Mm-hmm.
tame the wild beast, etc. But it's like, when's the last time you had to lift something really heavy? You
Yeah.
know, it's like most people these days in America work in like an office
Mm-hmm.
or
We're all
there's
nobility now.
a lot of us,
Or
yeah.
at least we're all gentry. For like our standards of living are effectively what most people would have considered to be noble or genteel
Yeah,
in
yeah.
most of human history.
Yeah,
Which,
no doubt we're
yeah,
more well off in all of those
yeah.
ways than
Which,
than 100.
yeah, I mean that's actually speaking to what I was going to kind of say to that. I guess. But do you feel heard, or do I need to speak back to
Uh,
that, or?
I was just gonna wrap up that point.
Okay,
Is
go
like,
for it.
yeah, it's like, we don't really need to be doing all those like big and strong things anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's because we're so much more in offices, in more like social situations. I think that it would be way more beneficial for like men and masculinity in general to
Mm-hmm.
tend more towards these sort of like social getting along kind of things.
Mm-hmm. So, let me see if I can summarize it real quick. Our changing social dynamics, particularly when it comes to work, is what I'm hearing you say, is such that it might be better for us to have what are generally considered to be more feminine qualities than masculine qualities.
Hmm. And
Is
I
that
would
a
hope
fair
that we don't
summation?
think, yeah, and I would hope that we don't have to think of being social as feminine, like even that we
And so within social
that,
dynamics, I should say that
yeah, yeah,
traditional social dynamics of feminism versus the social dynamics of masculinity.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Um, so I'm trying to think like how's the best. So I think before I get into my point, I think I want to speak a little bit uh a point when you were talking about aggression. I think that's another instance where the truth has been covered in crap and now we think the crap is truth. Because I think we've lost at least Western civilization. I can't speak to other ones, but I think we've kind of lost what the idea of meekness is. Right. So like when I say meekness, and there's an answer I expect, but I'm not trying to lead you into this, but like what would you think a meek person is?
Um, Meek is like not a word that I hear very often.
Fair.
I think like the like it brings to mind someone who's like cowering a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm pretty sure that I did hear like someone talking recently that meek is like a good. Was it you on the podcast?
It probably is me. Like let's be honest. Like I don't know of anyone else who really talks about this, but it's probably me. So meekness, yeah. So meekness traditionally is power withheld, or rather power used responsibly.
Okay.
Right. So it's not the idea.
It's knowing I could do this.
I can do this thing, but I'm choosing not to. Like I'm not. So like when I'm talking with my wife, like I'm a lot bigger than my wife, right? But that's like I'm never gonna like, and we both know this, but that's never gonna come into the meek thing to do is never to come like bring that into a thing, right? Like that's power used irresponsibly. Now let's say we're out walking and some random dog comes at us. I'm going to use the fact that I'm a lot bigger than my wife to interpose myself between her and the dog, right?
Mhm.
Like that's an appropriate use of strengths. And so that's like what meekness is. And so
Okay.
I think generally speaking, traditionally, and this is Andrew speaking, I have no academic basis for this, but traditionally speaking, meekness was considered a masculine quality because it is strength used appropriately. So now all of a sudden it's like, oh, there are times when you've got to be aggressive, you've got to be hard, you have to once more into the breach, like you have to go and do this thing. Like I'm now really regretting because there's a poem that really talks about this well and I'm forgetting what it is. It's gonna bug me.
And if you find it later, I'd be
I will. Yeah, I
happy to
will.
read it.
If I find it between now and when we drop this, I'll try to add it into the
Okay.
thing. So yeah, so I think that there is part of the problem that you're speaking to is that we don't understand our history enough to know what we're actually talking about.
Okay.
That's sorry, I
Our
brought it up
history-
2 levels. We don't understand why we have to be aggressive, and so we don't use aggression well.
Okay.
So that was a complete tangent point and not more of just Andrew was thinking than actual like what we're talking about. So anyway, my thought on whether we'll say gender binary is good for American society. And so the short answer is I think it is. I think for the most part it is, again, because of like it is the roles in which we see ourselves and what like our expectation is both to ourselves and to our communities are more helpfully defined by that. However, my caveat to that is we are currently in one of the most upheavaled times in human history. Like most technological advances took like centuries to introduce. Now it's, like I would say years, but really like it's months. Like you'll get an app and then all of a sudden it's like what was a pretty decent console game 2 years ago is now an app, is like a phone free download on your iPhone or cell phone or whatever.
Yeah.
And so like the what it means to be anything at this point has just been like completely muddied over. And the fact is like particularly in the West, we're so freaking rich. Like even our poor homeless people are like basically live like a lot of people in third world countries. Well, not minus the not having a house thing or other, but like the amount of food. It's there's 1%, there's exceptions. I'm talking broad brush strokes. So it's like I think we're in the middle of a time where there's not going to be great and easy answers because we don't know who we are. We don't necessarily know where we're going. And we don't know what the future is going to hold. Like just looking back in our recent past, like January 1st, I think everyone thought Trump would have won re-election. The economy was great. There was nothing going on. I mean, a lot of people in the media yelled and yelled and yelled, but it was like things are going great. There's no reason. And then we have a weird virus. We have what else? Like I feel like that crashes the economy. Like, sorry, you were saying something?
Oh yeah, I was just saying. I think I agree. I think if it weren't for the COVID pandemic and then the subsequent BLM protests, like Trump would have.
Yeah, but and so it's just. So it's like we thought the country was headed in one direction. It's maybe headed in a completely different direction. We don't know. Like I feel like as a society and as a people, we're just a little bit out to drift and we're pulling in a lot of different directions. So it's kind of hard to have any definition of what anyone or someone should be as a society. Now, that being said, as Americans, I think that the most healthy thing for us is a live and let live attitude.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, again, this is my libertarian come out. I think the government should step out of a lot of things. And I don't think that my church should be told what to think. But at the same time, I don't think my church should be able to say, hey, you can't live the way you particularly feel you want to live. So, I mean, that's how I see the American question in it. Like, because at the end of the day, I don't care what you think you are. Like, I don't. I think I'll think you may be wrong, but I don't care. Like at the end of the day, I don't care.
Okay, so you said quite a lot there.
I did. I made like 4 points.
Yeah.
I'm sneaky that way, Yali.
Yeah. Very, very sneaky.
Mm-hmm.
So, like the first big point that I heard that you kind of said earlier was basically having these sort of frameworks helps people to know what are their responsibilities, what they can aspire to, right? And then
maybe not what they should aspire to,
what they can,
but what, yeah, to a certain extent, like what your responsibilities are as an individual.
And then like the second half of what you were talking about was a little confusing to me, like what your actual point was, because you're saying like the libertarian, like live and let live, like I
Oh,
basically,
so yeah. Do you want me to explain, or do you want to try to say what I was saying?
well, I mean, I know what live and let live means and all that. I just, to me, like that more agrees with my side of the argument, where it's like, yeah, just like let people do what they want. Don't try to say like these are the two boxes, you should fit into one of them. Can you clarify?
Okay, so I like again. So this is what I think is healthy versus what I think is maybe. I think I'm having a ideal versus pragmatic discussion with
Okay.
myself, and you may be along for the ride.
Okay.
Is may be happening. So ideally, I think that it is more a healthy society, or at least a healthier society, would generally have broad brush strokes of what it means to be masculine or feminine, like what it means to be a man or a woman.
I have a question.
I have an
Just
answer.
a quick hypothetical question. Let's
Hmm.
say you were born into a society where like there were three recognized gender categories.
Hmm.
Like, do you think that in that society you would say like, yes, this is good, people should fit into one of these three neat categories?
Do we have a third sex? Do we have a third
It's
biological
a
sex? I mean, because like
hypothetical.
a lot of this comes down to genetics and how and how those end up being expressed.
Okay, so you think that like we should fit into femininity and masculinity because most bodies fit into male and
I'm
female?
saying that we express things generally as male or female because we are male or female. Sorry, we express things it's either masculine or feminine because we are either male or female.
Okay, so what about trans people? I mean, they do the exact opposite.
They do, but I mean, I'm saying in broad brush strokes. Like there's usually
Okay.
a mutation and a permeation from things. Like if I understand the statistics right, like people who suffer from gender dysphoria or who are generally consider themselves to be trans make up, I think, like a percentage of the population.
That is low numbers, but like this is another interesting point is like, would you agree that there's kind of been like an upsurge in trans identities in America?
I think there is, and I think that I think there's a couple contributing factors to that. One is so like there's probably more people who come out as gay now than there were 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, because it's in general more socially acceptable to be gay or lesbian. So I think that there's probably an upsurge because it's like, oh, I can now be trans, right? So I think that there's part of that. I think there's also contributing factors of like there's people who may think they're trans and then find out that they're not.
That's like an even smaller percentage of a percentage.
Probably,
About
but I
the
mean, like,
this.
I don't know the numbers. I'm just talking about contributing factors. So
Okay.
yes, I would agree that there is an upswell of it, but I don't like. I guess I would be more. I'm intellectually not curious about it until we have like a couple decades worth of data.
Okay. Well, so like the reason that I asked about it, just to make sure that we were on the same.
Hmm.
So there's been an uptick. I would say like I maybe even framed it a little bit disingenuously.
Hmm.
So apologies for that. But
That's
so
okay.
I would
It's human. To frame disingenuously is to be human.
say, okay, so I would say that there's been an uptick in like trans visibility. And
Hmm.
yeah, like you said, like it is more acceptable. Like I saw gay rights happen in my lifetime. Like
Hmm.
this when I was a kid, I did never thought it would happen. And here we are, like the Supreme Court, like is is a thing. Um, but so like trans people, like, and this is from my studies. Like this was the stuff that really kind of made me understand things. Is like trans people have basically always existed as
Hmm.
long as we've had like art and just like history, just like recorded history. Like there are trans people in the Kama Sutra and stuff.
Hmm.
So like trans people existed still in low numbers, but like generally recognized by society. And then at some point there was kind of a suppression of it. And
Hmm.
I would say that came in with like the general sort of expansion of like colonialism. And I would say like, yeah, like the Judeo.
I was about to say I would argue that go even farther than that, and say, like probably within the Roman Empire with the rise of Christianity, at least within
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
least within the West. And this is, and to your point, or at least a thing that we may agree on that may or may not surprise you is I think that there has been within the church there's been a problem of calling one sin particularly worse than another. Like all sin at the end of the day is sin. There are sins that are more consequential, but at the end of the day, any sin separates us from God's holiness. And so more going back to my main point is that I think the church has historically been very poor about accepting people who we would say struggle with homosexuality. Maybe I should say people who experience homosexual attractions,
Okay.
or who experience things that are outside of. I'm trying to find a way to say the norm without the average. How's that?
Sure. I mean, I feel you. It's basically impossible to talk about it in a way that's like politically correct because it is politically incorrect.
Yeah.
And it's also,
Well, and I think political correctness is not overly helpful. There's not being an asshole on purpose. There's being an asshole on purpose, and then there's just everyone talking.
mhm, mhm. So yeah, we went off a little tangent.
We
there.
did, and we're actually 5 minutes over our allotted 15 minutes, but we'll go a little bit longer.
Yeah. I was gonna say, so yeah, within like because yeah, you were saying like, oh, before colonialism, Christianity. I agree. I just trace it to colonialism is when it got like really widespread because yeah, Christianity like that was like in Europe and kind of like into Asia and stuff, and then it just like went across the whole world, and they saw any like small, excuse me, like any small culture or like of whatever size that was doing something that they viewed as homosexual or transsexual or whatever, they said these people are sinners, this is bad, this is something that you cannot be. And so then yeah, like within the sort of decline of like religiosity, is that a word?
I mean, it's one definition. It's like the seculars. The way I would define it is the secularization of Western civilization.
Yeah, sure. The rise of secularization or secularism.
The rise of secularism.
Yeah. As this has come up and like these religious ideals hold less like prominence in our society and our legal system, then it's like allowed for like gay and trans and other queer people to come up and like be who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with that. And like I said, like I think particularly as Americans, we are better the more people we include. The problem I think is we've started diluting what it means to be. We don't have like the close-handed issues of what Americanism.
Yeah, I think that's like part of. It's kind of a like a paradox built into this like American system is like let everyone be everyone or like be who they are, but then it's like but some people hate other people for who they are.
Yeah. Well, so I think that the intention, and this is a thing I think Jeremy and I are kind of, I don't know if we've talked about in episodes that we've posted, but it's a thing I believe we've talked about, is like there is the intention of like the Constitution of the founding documents. It's like everyone has these particular inalienable rights, and like you don't have no one, including government, has the right to violate them. Mm-hmm. And so it's the argument that I will either have made or will continue to make is that there are certain foundational Americanisms that like as long as we're all agreeing on that, then we can still be countrymen, right? Like we can still get along.
So is there like to bring that back to like the gender thing, is there like one of these core Americanisms or like something in the Constitution that you think this sort of proliferation of gender identities kind of like doesn't really work with?
Yeah, so I guess there's a couple practical points, and then maybe this might be a good Yali second guest podcast. because I think trying to figure out what the meta point is there, or at least what the overarching principle is worth discussing. So I think that there is the problem of the exceptions to the rules. So we'll go with trans people specifically. So most people who identify as trans, they're going to want to use a particular bathroom, right? And like,
Mhm.
for the most part, like, at the end of the day, I don't care. Like, maybe it'd be a little weird if someone who looks like a woman goes into the men's bathroom. I get it. Like, not the great, little weird for me, not the end of the world. The problem is now, like, where's the line? So can I just put on a dress and go into a women's bathroom? Right? There's a lot of women who would feel physically threatened if I did that. Right?
I suppose so. I mean, I think the bathroom thing is honestly really silly to me because, I mean, I've used women's restrooms and no one has
You
ever.
have, but did you use it? Did you use it in like oh, this is a necessity, or this is, well, no, that's not the point I should
I
make.
have used women's restrooms very casually in specific places. I don't do
Mhm.
this all the time or
Yeah.
anything, and I'm not doing it wearing a dress. But I think like the generally, so people go to the bathroom to pee and poop.
Yes.
That's like
And
all that
again,
really
so like
matters.
the point I'm making is, like, for the most part, it's not a real issue. It's the exceptions to the rule.
Well,
And
the
so the
exceptions, right, is like the kind of the panic over it is like, oh, like a man's gonna put on a dress and come in and sexually assault someone, right?
yes. Yeah.
So
So
sexual assault is already illegal.
yeah, yes, but the fear of the harm the fear of the harm is exponentially increased when it's like, hey, you can't kick this perv out of the restroom.
Wait, but wait. It's not if it's a pervert, then yes, you can.
Yes, but like, so the point I'm making, and maybe the point I'm not making well, is that the issue is there's exponential harm in the exception over like the normativity.
Nah, I'm not getting it.
Okay, so if let's see if I can come at it this way. So if the are you familiar with like the greater good theory, or
Is that just sort of like,
utilitarianism?
yeah, utilitarianism?
Utilitarian, the greatest good for the most amount of people, right? So the utilitarian argument again for bathrooms would be more women are going to feel minor discomfort than the discomfort of somebody who is trans, than the amount of discomfort the people from trans will feel, because the women will feel more threatened.
Okay. Counterpoint would
I'm just,
be
I mean,
uh,
you can make the counterpoint. Like I said, I'm not particularly interested. I'll be honest and say I'm not particularly interested in it. I was just making several examples to give you other points
okay,
of
okay.
like where there's harm. Like, I'm not particularly interested in making the argument there, particularly when we're trying to wrap up.
Yeah, I know. I
But
got a little
yeah,
bit heated there at the end.
yeah. So, and that might be my fault for not communicating a point well, which goes back to, there are some ideas that you don't have ownership to until you've really, really thought them through. The other example, wait, hold on. Let me step back, and what was the original question that I was giving an example to?
Um, it was like, does the proliferation of gender identities, how does that like have issues with like core
With
Americanism?
core Americanisms. Okay. So I guess at the where I kind of lean into it, and we'll try this again. Where I kind of lean into it is the example: you can swing your fists around as much as you want until you hit somebody else, right?
Okay.
So it doesn't really matter what you identify as until it starts affecting somebody else's life, right? So,
Okay.
which is why I gave the bathroom example. The other example in that is trans, specifically, I can never remember, if you are a trans man, you were at one point identifying as female, but then you are now male.
Yeah.
Which direction does it go?
Yeah. If trans women, trans men are men. Like,
Got it. At the end of the day, got it. Okay. So the problem is if you have trans women in women's sports, right?
The classic sports argument.
But it is like I'm giving like in society, like where does the harm happen? And so the harm happens in that like you have people who, because of genetics, because they have a Y chromosome, have greater bone density and greater muscle mass, right? So they are physically more capable than their competitors, which isn't fair. So there's harm being done to other people.
Okay, what is a question? So yeah. So I get the specific point you're making,
Mm-hmm.
but like, what is the Americanism here?
The Americanism is we don't have to care about it until we don't in America, we don't have to care about it until something causes harm.
Okay, so the example here is that like a trans athlete would have. I mean, yeah, I know that there have been like a few stories of like the wrestler, right?
Mm-hmm.
The wrestler,
The
who's
track
a
people,
woman, right? And who just went and like like bludgeoned some cis woman
Mm-hmm.
athlete,
well,
right?
that's the MMA fighter.
Yeah. That's like the one that I've heard about. This seems to be. This is something that I mean people have been talking about quite a bit in the last few years. It seems to me to be kind of like what do you call it? Like a red herring almost, where it's like it is a thing, but people use this to be like, okay, so like there was this specific instance in this specific sport, and that means that like trans people in general are a threat to America.
I think that might be at least coming from the right. I think that may be a little overblown. I think there is. I'm not going to say that there isn't a sense of that feeling, because there's a thing that it's like, again, if you have something, so if you have a part of the population that is like a percentage of a percentage, or wherever we want to put that, a lot of people haven't experienced that. So there's more of an othering there than there is a humaning thing, and that's always going to be a problem in minority, particularly hyper minority populations. That being said, I think when push comes to shove, most people, particularly on the right, and within, I would argue, a lot of Christian circles, don't necessarily care unless it's coming down to like, oh, hey, I don't feel like these specific issues of harm.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I mean, I would say like those things should be addressed, and I think have been addressed by like those kind of sports organizations.
Well, they have, like, the problem we're having in those the sports examples is there's a lot of people who are arguing, no, these people are women, so they should be playing women's sports.
Right.
And there's been rulings in that favor, which, I would argue, coming from the right, is, hey, there is now harm being done to other people because of this.
Right. Yeah. I see the point being made. From what I know, in the abstract, yeah, I agree. In reality, I think that the one case that I brought up, this was I think the first really big one that sort of sparked this whole trans athlete kind of conversation. I think since then a lot has been done in specific different organizations. And I think it varies by sport because certain sports require different kind of physiological stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But for as far as I know, I think it was in wrestling. It was now it's you can only compete once you've already been on hormones for X amount of time or something.
Yeah, see, I would still say that that's not super helpful.
Well,
because you still have
I think that you're about to say that you still have that sort of physiological advantage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what hormone replacement therapy does to a person?
I would imagine that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I asked the question. It was, yeah, I guess it was rhetorical.
It was leading. Yeah.
It was, yeah.
It was.
I mean, it drastically does change bone density.
Yes, it does. But at the end of the day, you still have an XX or XY chromosome because our technology's not there yet. Mm-hmm. So I mean, a trans woman is still going to be producing higher levels of testosterone than a person who was born with two X's.
Trans women take testosterone blockers.
Okay, that's great, but I mean, they're still naturally they are forcing down something that they would naturally have that someone else is
Yeah,
trying to
but
come up to.
they're forcing it down, so it
But
effectively.
I'm saying it's like, just because you're forcing something down doesn't mean that you're not still having a greater advantage than somebody else, particularly like within athletics. So within athletics, even if you're taking testosterone blockers, you're the very thing that you are doing is causing you to create more testosterone.
Being an athlete, you
Being an
mean?
athlete,
Okay, well, the women
you're still building muscles. It's not like they're stripping
right,
away
well,
muscles to come down.
yeah, but it's like so do women athletes.
Yes, but they can't do it to the same extent.
Wait, but that's what like hormone replacement therapy is
It
supposed to do.
Yes, that's what it's supposed to do, but I'm saying that like it doesn't it what something's supposed to do and what it actually does are two different things. And I mean, maybe you have better data on this, but I'm just saying the examples that I've seen within sports, it's it's trans women blowing out all of the records, or just absolutely murderizing someone in wrestling or MMA.
Right, and you're on the right, so of course you've seen the examples where this does happen.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm on the left, which counters these narratives. So I've seen the ones where it's like a trans woman still gets like 7th place in a running competition or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to acknowledge the blindness in both of our POVs here,
Mm-hmm.
in that like there's definitely more of middle ground there, where I think we both see like the extremes on the both ends.
Mm-hmm.
I think that like in general, like this is not it is an issue, but is like not as big of an issue as it is sometimes made out to be.
That, I mean, I can probably get on board with that, but it's more I guess the point I was trying to make is more in like the general discussion of like how do we get along as Americans, and I don't think we're going to be able to like really dig too much deeper into this one. Is where's the principle that we hold? Like there's always in any decision there's going to be compromise, there's going to be winners and losers, and so it's like where as a society are we okay with the losers being, or in what aspect does somebody have to be a loser? Both sides I think will have some aspects that they will be the loser in, but like where's the healthy balance in that? And then how do we as a society say, okay, we acknowledge that this isn't the best, but it's the best we have at the moment.
Mm-hmm. I think like I would agree with that those are like good values, like a good way for the conversation to go.
Mm-hmm.
I think like just like last thing on like the trans athletes, like I said, like I'm pretty sure that they are kind of trying to find that middle ground of finding like where can we put this where like trans athletes can still compete, but like trying as we can with our technology and stuff to bring them to the level of like the cis athlete.
Like I don't know if we'll ever get there, but if like we got to the point where one day if I decided it's like, oh, I want to just have 2 X chromosomes, and I can get there.
Very, very difficult because I feel like every single cell in your body.
Yes, no, literally every single cell in your body is either masculine or it's either male or female.
Thank you.
So hence why I'm like you are always going to be expressing one of those 2 things. But I'm gonna let you are the guest. I'm gonna let you have the final word, and then I think I can say the catchphrase.
Okay. This has been very, very fun.
Mm-hmm.
Nice chatting with you, Andrew. Thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome. Hey, you know what? It's always great that we're like, oh my gosh, we have fans. Let's start getting our fans on. So.
Yep. I've been a fan since day one.
Mm-hmm.
I knew from day one I wanted to be on here, discuss the issues. Hopefully, someday soon in studio with you and Jeremy together.
Hey, the moment COVID's over, I am all about that. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm on the right. Like civil disobedience now is having people over for brunch.
Yeah. I mean, you and Jeremy have been doing the episodes together. You two are clearly feeling safe enough. If you had asked me, I probably would have come over. But
oh yeah, like the only reason we're doing the Zoom is because Jeremy, when the end of I think the episode that's dropping this week that we're recording, Jeremy said, like, yeah, I really want to do my part, and I was like, that means like the moment lockdowns happen, it's like I have to respect what Jeremy's wish is, and so we'd better do this online.
Yeah, I mean, I heard we hit 500,000 cases in LA today.
I could see that.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's
Our third world city in a first world country.
oh, yeah, this
Yeah, areas of massive wealth next to areas of massive poverty with a bunch of dust covering everything.
yeah, no, LA has a whole lot of problems. I
Mhm.
really want to get the heck out of here.
Kansas City's lovely. I'll just tell you that.
Where is?
Kansas City. It's the best city in the country. We just don't like advertising
Hey,
it.
there we go. I thought we were gonna make it through the whole episode without a Kansas reference.
It's not possible. Not
Oh, wait, you
possible.
said Kansas City, right? Isn't that in Oklahoma?
Oh, fuck you. Oh, sorry, Lisa. It's on the border of Kansas and Missouri. There is a street called State Line that is literally our state line.
Wait, is there not a Kansas City, Oklahoma?
I mean, there might be, but it's some tiny little town.
Okay,
You're thinking of Oklahoma City, which is in Oklahoma.
Okay,
You know, flyover country, there are people who live there. Fucking Angelinos.
It's
Sorry,
been so
Alicia.
long since I took U.S. geography.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, summation. I think that the gender binary and the pressures put on us to act masculine or feminine, in general, while they may have some good qualities, like like Andrew, we were just talking about Jeremy. Like Andrew was saying,
We're both gingers, I get it.
they do give us some kind of framework, which can be nice for some people, but can be very stifling for others. And I think it would be nice if we moved to a society that was less strict about these kind of things. I don't have any problem with people who, see the vast array of options and then choose, I want to be a man, I want to be a woman. I think that there are definitely people who fit comfortably into these categories, but I think in general, we could be a little bit more open-minded.
Okay. I agree with parts of that and drastically disagree with others, but Yali, we have had a charged social conversation. We were friends before, which BT dubs, we were friends before. We
played Dungeons and Dragons together.
We played Dungeons and Dragons brings the world together. Yeah, so anyway, we were friends before. I feel like we were friends during, and I feel like we're friends now. So
yep.
Cheers, Yali.
Cheers.
Alrighty. Well, that was a friendly argument podcast.
Another one for the books.
Another one for the books. So feel good?
Yeah, feels good to me.
It does. It's one of those things I found, like, when I talk with Jeremy, very rarely am I like, yeah, we really either changed each other's minds or like really got somewhere. But like almost every time I'm done, I'm like, I feel like that was a good conversation. I feel like I was at least seen and heard.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I feel like at the very least, because these are exactly the type of conversations that I think are really important to be having right now. Obviously, I'm trying to change people's minds. In this conversation, I'm more focused on changing maybe the audience's mind.
Oh yeah, no, that's the point of it.
Right.
Like
Okay.
again, like I'm going to keep referencing how to have impossible conversations, and probably my mother. And it's one of those, like, people don't change their minds quickly. It's slowly and over time, and usually because somebody has influenced them, like, personally.
Yeah.
So.
And that's the other thing is, like, if you and I didn't know each other in like a non-socio-political context, I don't think that we could have had as pleasant of a conversation.
I could see that.
That's what I've found in the past,
Yeah.
is having the sort of mutual, like, respect and understanding and like basic levels of trust allows me to hear, like, you say something that to me, if I just heard a stranger say this, I'd be like, what is this guy talking about? Since it's you, I want to be like, what is this guy talking about?
Yeah. I've already built capital that I may be an asshole, but I'm at least a likable asshole.
Welcome to Friendly Argument with Andrew Bernard and Jeremy Jones.
Let's do this.
New stuff, all the tangents, some politics, booze,
Some more politics.
stuff about Kansas, and lots of cheers aids.
Friendly Argument is a podcast showcasing conversations that seek common ground across the aisle of American politics, as well as a few laughs. We hope you guys enjoy, and thanks for watching.